Okay, apparently we're doing overly sarcastic productions next because I cannot speak worse. We're just going to make it right by accident. This is going to be modern classic Stranger Summarized, or Stranger Summarized. I can't speak today. Stranger in a Strange Land. We're going to do this one because apparently every time I tried to say anything else, it would not come out as this. So I'm going to take that little brain fart and think, you know what? Maybe I should just do this now. Let's move into it before I say anything else stupid.
The year 1961. The man, Robert A. Heinlein, author, dreamweaver, die-hard libertarian, hot on the
Didn't Heinlein do? Oh yeah, Battlefield Earth.
heels of the success of Starship Troopers,
Oh,
the
Starship
granddaddy
Troopers.
of military SF, and a personal middle finger to the bleeding hearts of the era who thought that maybe the president should dial back the nukes a little bit, Heinlein wrote a novel titled Stranger in a Strange Land, a book that is allegedly about a human raised on Mars returning to Earth as an outside observer with insights into the strange pretenses of human society and a purer perspective on life. And then in the third act, he founds a sex cult, so kind of a mixed
Oh, so basically it's Scientology. Got it.
bag, really. Our story begins with the first manned mission to Mars, a 3-year journey carefully arranged so that none of the 8 crew members were likely to go crazy and murder each other. The plan worked a little too well, as when the second mission to Mars lands 25 years later, they find that the entire crew got into a big poly relationship, had a kid, and then died. This kid is now a young man named Valentine Michael Smith, who has been
How do they all have a single kid? I don't think that's how... What? Let's just not.
raised by Martians his whole life. Oh yeah, by the way, Martians are real and there's air on Mars. That's sci-fi, baby. So Mr. Valentine is brought back to Earth, where the increased gravity and air pressure immediately make him sick, and he's hospitalized so he can acclimate safely. Now, Michael is a bit of an oddball. See, being raised by Martians means he's got almost zero understanding of human behavior, but it's also given him strange powers, like he can astrally project when under stress. He also has no concept of gender
Please do not confuse the Martian No Girls Allowed. Oh, God.
because Mars has no women. Enter Dr. Jillian Boardman, an extremely female woman with such hobbies as men and wearing dresses on dates with men. Dr. Jill hears about this mysterious patient whose room is no girls allowed and immediately breaks in to see him because women, am I right? So Michael's grasp on people is pretty rudimentary at this point, but when Jill offers him a glass of water, he's shocked. See, on Mars, water is a pretty rare resource, and sharing water is like a lifelong bond thing called being water brothers. So he accepts, and they share a glass of water, which means they're now bonded for life. Oops.
Just going to throw it out there. My thoughts on Heinlein are basically the same thoughts as the guy who founded Scientology. Basic excuse to share their crazy ideas in ways that wouldn't have people at the Thanksgiving table go, Uncle Rob, just shut up. Admittedly, that probably still happened as well.
Michael asks Jill if she's one of those women he's heard so much about, and she immediately offers to get naked, as women do. But instead she leaves to go on a date with her boyfriend, an intrepid reporter named Ben who's covering Michael's story. So when the governments of the world realize that Michael is both incredibly rich and possibly the legal owner of Mars and start trying
The fuck? No. Let's go back a second here. He's the legal owner of Mars because even though there are Martians that you've confirmed are there and you only managed to send a handful of people, this guy is the one who you think owns it. Okay. I have so many questions and all of them are, it's Heinlein. Just ignore it.
trying to manipulate, imprison, or kill him, even going so far as to get a lookalike to pass as him for the news reports. Jill hears all about it from Ben until he's abruptly black-bagged by government bad guys and falls off the face of the earth. But first he tells Jill they should try and get Michael to a friend of his, Jubal Harshaw, an acclaimed author, doctor,
LB or LOB MD SD Bonviand Gourmet Sabriant, popular author extraordinaire, neo-pessimist philosopher. Those were all actual listed in the book. They actually listed off all of this. Please tell me it wasn't just once, like when you met the guy. I already have a bad opinion of Heinlein because I think he's kind of a hack. But that's not helping. That's just making, oh God. He's basically the 1900s version of the author who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, isn't he?
lawyer, philosopher, author, self-insert, and all-around rad dude who owns a compound and won't let the government push him around, no siree. Anyway, Jill can't figure out what happened to Ben,
But also wants to know why they haven't installed his employment by getting rid of all of their gunk in the toilet yet. Funny how everyone wants to live on their own without using the government up until they need plumbing. It's actually a thing. And when you find out what buildings do not involve plumbing, look at the Burj Khalifa.
And while she's investigating, she stumbles on Michael, who's been relocated to a secret room in the hospital in preparation for being sneakily
He's
murdered.
easily found.
Whoops. Jill realizes Ben probably got in too deep and she's on her own. So she unlocks a side door so she can get in later and goes off to prepare her super serious rescue mission, which involves dressing Michael up in a nurse uniform and walking him out the back door. Round of applause.
I mean, it's dumb, but it's the level of dumb that it actually probably would work, so give them props for that one.
So Jill and Michael take a cab to Ben's place because I know the first place I would hide a political fugitive is the empty apartment of a black bag government prisoner. So
Yeah, that
Michael
makes sense.
takes a bath, which is incomprehensibly luxurious by Martian standards, and he and Jill have some wacky romantic hijinks until two government thugs break down the door and slap Jill, which Michael doesn't like. And it turns out what Michael doesn't like disappears. Both thugs vanish, Jill freaks out, which makes Michael freak out, Michael goes catatonic, and I think it's time for a scene change. Let's zoom out a little bit and get a look at how this future Earth works. The world is divided into a handful of mega nations and some really big religions whose gospels are treated as straight scientific fact. We get a look
So, normal. Got it.
into the daily life of Secretary General Douglas, who, as it turns out, is not the brains behind the Mike-manipulating government operation. That honor goes to his wife, Agnes, a domineering and angry woman who's quite upset they lost Michael, but suggests they simply designate the lookalike as the real one and declare the real Michael to be a
Oh, please, we have a perfectly good replacement. Agnes Douglas, the brains behind the Federation, has the most generic Freudian motive ever put to paper. Oh, yeah.
fake if and when he ever reveals himself. Douglas protests that the scientists will be able to tell the difference, but Agnes scoffs that the only true science is astrology. It's time for Deep Thoughts with Heinlein, philosophical observations on society and human nature jarringly inserted into an otherwise immersive narrative. It's like Heinlein is personally lecturing you from just beyond the page. Agnes is like that because Freud was right about everything. That concludes our Deep Thoughts with Heinlein. So Agnes
Heinlein is one of the reasons that the Starship Trooper movies, I think, are actually better than the books. Because the books were unironically horrible, where the movie was meant to be horrible as a joke about Nazis, but it was popular enough because they were so machismo-based that people kind of liked them. And, both camps have their own rights and, it's fine. But they were both actually good for different ways to view it at the same time. As opposed to the books, which the more you read about Heinlein, the more you realize you shouldn't. Just going back to that earlier Doctor Who's a self-insert has all the titles building himself up so he can basically pat himself on the back. Oh boy.
calls up her horoscope lady, Vesey, and orders a horoscope on the man from Mars. Vesey
Also, this might sound like a joke, and it is, but there have been multiple world leaders, democratic and dictator, who have relied on astrologers. And as you can guess, every single one of them was a massive fuck up.
does her best, but finds the process is confounded by the fact that Michael was born on Mars, and the entire astrology setup is kinda Earth-centric, so she just makes something up, which I'm sure real astrologers would never do. Meanwhile, let's
Shocking.
turn our gaze to Jubal Harshaw, author, visionary, warrior poet, Renaissance gentleman, who is currently engaged in watching his 3 sexy young secretaries splash around in a pool. As he dictates a short story about a kitten to one of them,
Yeah, self-insert, all right. But mother said the kitten, it is ever so cold. What?
his doorman rings to tell him there's a
Sir, there's a distressed young lady asking for your help. Oh no.
very distraught young woman at the door, and after asking if she's sufficiently hot, Jubal has her buzzed in. The woman, of course, is Jill, who has Michael with her in a suitcase. She couldn't wake him up, so she
You could... You're not actually supposed to... Okay, sure. Oh my god.
freaked out, put him in a bag, and drove him to the first place she could think of. Fortunately, when she asks him nicely to wake up, he does, and the two of them fill Jubal in on what exactly is going
Goodness.
on. Jubal agrees to help them out and invites him into his home, and on the way, he sagely informs Jill that she's clearly in love with Michael because
By the way, you're totally in love. Why not?
what other possible motivation could she have? Oops, did someone forget to give their main character a motivation? Anyway, the story shifts into downtime as Michael and Jill hang out at
And he's just fascinated by the water, and she's just staring at the women. Got it.
Jubal's compound and have a grand old time. It's time for more Deep Thoughts with Heinlein. All human achievement has been motivated by the promise of hot, steamy sex. That concludes
While that is heavily reductive, all 3D technology does basically come down to a specific character in a specific sequel to a sequel of a game who people wanted to make specific art of, and I cannot go into further detail on YouTube. But there is a reason why that even if it's a joke, it's not entirely joke. It's just mostly 30% not true.
Includes our deep thoughts with Heinlein. So we learn a little more about Michael's upbringing. Among other things, apparently there used to be a fifth planet between Mars and Jupiter that the Martians decided shouldn't exist anymore.
Okay, one, that's stupid. Was going to be one, but it never actually was there because the tidal force between Jupiter and Mars tore it apart. What remains is a demi-planet called Ceres, and we do know about it because it's mostly the water in the asteroid belt. It's not a secret. But this was written long enough ago that those were probably not exactly heavy thoughts and would still be coming out fact-wise. Yeah, it's got to remember, this is enough years ago where the common knowledge now that you can easily find out on Wikipedia wasn't there because there was no Wikipedia. Oh God, can you imagine what this would sound like if there actually was a Wikipedia for him to draw random bullshit off of? In fact, I'm going to not do that. It would just be a reprediction of Twitter. And yes, I did just say a reprediction, and I stand by what I said.
And that's why there's an asteroid belt instead. Cool. Anyway, they do a little testing and realize that not only can Michael effortlessly make things vanish by displacing them in the fourth dimension, he can also levitate stuff. He has a hard time communicating how this works in English, so he starts teaching Jill Martian. At some point in all this, we learn that Martians eat their dead, and it's a form of ritual closeness. Leaving a body to rot is seen as this horrible affront. Jubal's handyman, Duke, is...
I mean... I'm pretty sure that is some of humans' traits. It's not unheard of, not something most people would do. But sky burials were a thing as well, and even though it wasn't people eating, it was don't let the body rot, feed it to the birds, so... Yeah, sure, let's ignore everything about this, it's disturbing.
Is horrified, and Jubal tells him for an entire chapter that thinking cannibalism is gross is just another form of social brainwashing. And also, Duke probably has cannibal ancestors because he's 1/8 Native American. Okay, wow.
Yeah, Heinlein was an asshole. But also, pro-eating people. Got it. Hannibal Lecter. Not expecting that one, but sure, let's do it.
It's time for more deep thoughts with Heinlein. Cannibalism is actually fine. That concludes our deep thoughts with Heinlein. So Jubal is doing some big complicated plan to help out Michael that involves circumventing hierarchical bureaucracy to demand to speak to a manager, and while he does that, he and Michael have a chat about religion. Michael caught a TV broadcast about the Fosterite religion, which is this kind of hyper-commercialized megachurch. Michael doesn't understand religion at all.
A hyper-commercialized megachurch. Telling people they can get God for $9.99. That's... probably cheaper than what most of the ones in reality charge.
In part because Martians know exactly what happens when they die. It's actually a stage in their life cycle. When their body dies, they become an old one, which are like the supreme authority on Mars. Dying is essentially a promotion. So while most human religions seek to answer the question, what happens when we die, Michael doesn't understand the question because he already knows. He also doesn't understand the search for a creator of the universe because he doesn't question why things exist. And most importantly, Michael doesn't understand what lying is. To him, falsehoods only happen by mistake. So since the Fosterites on TV said they were the one true way into heaven, to Michael that means they have to know how human old ones work. And Michael's very curious about human old ones because he hasn't seen any yet. Meanwhile, Michael starts throwing around a Martian word, grok, which is kind of impossible to fully define in English, but means something like really, really understand something.
To understand, to drink, to become one with, to consume, to get, to really get. You know, I've actually heard this term being thrown around, someone as being called a grok. I didn't realize it was a Heinlein one, and now I feel sad that I've heard this phrase.
Like on the deepest possible...
And yes, out of all of this, grok is the thing that managed to come from it and had a lasting impact. Heinlein would probably hate it, so I kind of am okay with this. Never mind. Let's leave it at this. I kind of like this now.
Level where you make it a part of yourself. It was actually popular enough that it kind of entered the real world, so
Yep.
If you want to impress your 60s friends, feel free to start throwing it around. Anyway, Michael is having trouble grokking religion and God and stuff, but then he suddenly gets it. His definition of God can't be properly communicated in English, but it seems to be kind of omnipresent, because the way he tries to explain it is thou art God, but also I am God. In his worldview, it seems like everything is God. They also talk a bit about how Mike doesn't laugh and doesn't understand humor.
I mean, isn't that one who was kind of like all is one? Never mind.
how it's a part of humanity he still doesn't quite get. Anyway, the conversation gets interrupted because, oh right, Michael is a fugitive. 2 helicopters fly in and Jubal initiates his plan. Michael is sent to hide at the bottom of the pool, but decides after a little while that he probably doesn't need to be in his body while he does that, so he projects out and sees a whole lot of cops with guns, a very angry Jubal, and a lot of complicated lawyer speak he doesn't really get. However, things take a turn when the cops start threatening Jill, so Michael immediately disappears all of them. Whoops. So Jubal reworks the plan a little.
Do they just get stored in the 4th dimension, or are they dead? You know, I'm talking about too many things that probably never get answered because Heinlein is a hack. Secretary General, I have bypassed your bureaucracy to call your personal phone. I honestly had no idea this thing still worked. I mean, it's not impossible. Just, you know, who answers?
And uses the fact that he's friends with Agnes's astrologist to get Secretary General Douglas on the horn just as a second wave of cops arrive. Jubal.
Oh, can you imagine using personal connections to talk to people in power? That is so completely mundane to the point where it actually is kind of weird that that's a plot point as opposed to just the obvious way you would do it.
Tells the Secretary General that he's representing Michael as his official lawyer, he wants to settle this reasonably and publicly, he wants Ben back, and he wants nobody arrested. Douglas agrees, the cops are called off, some proceedings are arranged, and everyone settles in for the night. That was easy. Jill, Mike, and Jubal talk about kissing, and Jubal educates Mike that he should only kiss pretty young women. It's time for more deep thoughts with Heinlein. Human society brainwashes us into accepting artificial limitations on our lives and our choices. This is wrong. Love should be free and without limit. Unless it's gay, of course. And that concludes our...
Or if they're not pretty enough in your estimation. Or, you know, your estimation is wrong. Let's go with that. Yeah, again, he's a hack.
Deep thoughts with Heinlein. So they get Ben back. He was just stuck in some dark room and pumped full of drugs for like a week. Nothing to worry about. Ben's weak enough...
I mean, it's the 60s. That's probably someone's goal in life.
Isolation has made him reevaluate his life, and he realizes he wants to marry Jill. But her relationship with Mike has him conflicted until he realizes that the maternal instincts she's displaying are some of the qualities that originally drew him to her. The other qualities being her boobs and butt. So Ben and Jubal prepare for the proceedings and realize that Mike has no concept of personal ownership, so all this stuff that makes him a target isn't even stuff he wants. So maybe they can keep him safe by getting rid of it. The day the...
Also, he doesn't own Mars. That's not how ownership works. That's literally not how it works. Being the last person there wouldn't matter when there's other people there who can contest the claim. Granted, that's never stopped anyone before. And also, if he doesn't defend it, then it wouldn't be his claim, because that's also one of the ways that you maintain a claim outside of claimed areas where you have paperwork to show that you own a claim. It's, I'm here, you can't get rid of me, fuck all y'all. That's literally how the expansion into the Americas happened. You know, that level of, I'm sure nothing bad would ever come from this.
Proceedings arrives, the gang all share a pitcher of water and become water brothers, and while they're getting ready, a Fosterite representative invites Mike to visit their church next week, and Jubal agrees to come along. So this whole proceeding is basically performative. Jubal and Douglas have already agreed, but they need to make a show of it. Basically, they give Douglas control over all of Mike's finances and say Mike can't own Mars because it's inhabited. This fixes literally everything, and the meeting is adjourned. Well, that was easy.
I mean, yeah, but also that's literally never going to stop anyone.
The gang all goes and gets lunch, and they talk about Mike and how he might actually be some kind of ambassador or spy for the Martians, and how the Martian ability to make their problems disappear is actually really unsettling and freaky.
I mean, yes, but also, if he thought you were a problem, you wouldn't be here, so he's not a threat unless you start to be one. When someone has the power to say we're essentially gods, or, you know, gone, you know, it's really like, you know, you're so powerful, it doesn't really matter.
About time somebody noticed. So now Mike isn't a political prisoner or a fugitive, he's a celebrity. And you know what that means? Fan mail. And you know what that means? Dirty pics from fans. Jill has opinions about this, and you know what that means? It's time for more deep thoughts with Heinlein. One of the great, tragic, insurmountable differences between the sexes is that no woman likes, watches, or even understands pornography. That concludes our deep thoughts with Heinlein. So Mike...
Did he actually seriously? Like, I thought a lot of things just him BSing it, but if he actually believed that, that's... Yeah, I know, I've already said my thoughts on him. Wow. And Olive, you mentioned this was written by the Starship Troopers guy. Why would he care what aliens want? Honestly, at this point, he doesn't care what most people want. Heinlein is one of the guys you read, and then you're like, oh wow, that's so engaging. And then you realize later, he's not good at it. It's just the other people who are really good writers were either not interested in science fiction, or the people who were in science fiction who could write were interested in concepts, not characters. So the stories were kind of Asimov. Yeah, Asimov, great ideas, inspirational ideas. Literally the reason we have satellites, because his story about a satellite as science fiction inspired the creation of them in reality. But he was way more concerned with characterization as the thing that happened in the background by accident, as opposed to this is the plot to show this concept that I want to work through as a thought experiment. They're really good for that, but you could tell he's, a scientist working through a thought experiment first and putting it to paper, and admittedly not bad second later. Not great, but not bad.
Mike goes and visits the Fosterite megachurch, which is kind of like if Notre Dame accepted microtransactions. They show off the perfectly preserved body.
How long ago did this come out? 4 years ago? I just need to... Notre Dame donations. University of Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame, Friends of Notre Dame. Not what they meant, but also close enough that, can you imagine a church taking money from people donating to them? I don't know why that would sound in any way, shape, or form like it would be a joke. That's... yeah. It's not so much that they don't, it's that they haven't got enough yet. And they make enough already.
Of their founder, which Mike is disturbed by because that's not an old one, that's a corpse nobody's eaten yet. They watch a sermon, which involves a snake dance and a lot of yelling, and then a major higher up in the church goes to try and convert Mike to Fosterism. But clearly Mike isn't into it because that higher up is never seen again. The gang go home, and Mike has a lot to think about, so while the others talk religion, Mike goes catatonic and levels up. He develops a much better understanding of human social stuff, and when he goes out by the pool, he finds one of his water brothers. Which one is not specified, but we know she's female because they bang. And in the process, she seems to actually grok what he meant with his "thou art God" thing. So
he did the what with the what one? Oh, thou art God. Go fish. What? So he goes to sleep, has sex, and is God. I mean, let's just ignore the fact that he's the child of 8 people. Genetics don't work that way, but whatever.
So it turns out he can communicate his new religious ideas that are untranslatable into English, but he can only do it through sex. You know what that means? It's sex cult time, baby! So I want to manage some expectations here. So everything before this has been complex political machinations and espionage and an exploration of humanity through an alien lens and some genuinely cool sci-fi world building.
And the rest is the essential equivalent of a fancier, much fancier writer doing Inquisitor, but without the 40K backdrop. If you understand the book I just referenced, you would also, one, you're probably cussing me out for reminding you of that, and I'm not going to apologize. If I had to think it, you do too. And two, the multiple usages of the word fancy do mean that while I think Heinlein is a hack, it's not all been him just talking about his not even slightly repressed sexual fantasies. It's mostly been that, but with a bunch of other things, as opposed to the guy who wrote Inquisitor, where it was completely and utterly that. And it was to the level of, oh, dear God, I wouldn't even say keep it in your pants. Just put it in this different state. Ugh.
Everything after this is about a sex cult that gives you superpowers. I'm not exaggerating, I'm not minimizing, that is the entire focus of the book from this point on. Just fair warning. And
this is not an unusual thing for a lot of, let's go with science fiction writers in the previous century. Dune, for example, had a lot of that. Granted, it's because Dune was published in Playboy. Yeah. There's an expectation there, and, that was one.
For some ungodly reason you have a kid watching this, or are a kid watching this, please don't. I can't have that on my conscience. Yeah, so Mike, now brimming with confidence, goes out into the world with Jill to start spreading the good word of bang me. He and Jill briefly work at a carnival and befriend a tattooed lady, Patty, who's a diehard Fosterite until she sleeps with Mike and becomes a diehard Mike follower instead. Also, Patty's nearly 50, but she looks like she's about 30, and apparently this is because she's lived a life free of worry and purely devoted to happiness and having a good time.
I mean, stress does kind of fuck you up, but maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's hedonism. Oh God, he's going to understand hedonism wrong, isn't it? the classical Greek hedonism was not actually just going out of the way as we use hedonism now, with basically Slanesh. It was living a life that was just, this is an interesting thing. I would do it. Oh, I would like to have these grapes. I would like to take a nap right now. I feel like I should probably work out because the exercise of my muscles feels good. So I should probably work on my physique because I enjoy that. But also not overindulgence. It was indulgence to the point where it made sense to experience reality. But then, Slanesh is what we use hedonism for essentially right now. For anyone who doesn't know 40K enough to understand the reference, Slanesh, do not look it up on a public location. You will get images. And they will be exactly what you're thinking. And that is pretty much, Heinlein is basically Slanesh. He's just talking Slanesh right now. It's even purple.
This is a big part of Mike's whole thing too, so she's a good fit to the magic Martian sex cult. By the way, these scenes are intercut with footage from actual heaven, where the Fosterite founder Foster and the dude Mike disappeared are observing the proceedings, and it is at this point that Foster suggests that Mike might actually be the Archangel Michael. Spoiler.
So also, the guy who was an uneaten, not actually God, was literally in heaven, and he was saying people of the fourth dimension, which was also heaven, because the people who disappeared were there. Got it.
Spoiler alert. He's right. So anyway, Jill and Mike go to Vegas, and while Mike uses his telekinesis to cheat at gambling, Jill gets bored and decides to become a showgirl, in the process realizing that she was just being a prude before, and she really likes people looking at her nearly naked. It's time for more deep...
My first thought here is, of course, there's no way anyone would get into being a showgirl that easily. There's other things in Vegas you probably could, but that is not one of them. God, Heinlein is such a hack. He's the kind of guy who looks at 50 Shades of Grey and goes like, oh, I like this writing style. I have opinions of 50 Shade, and all of them are, it's just bad writing. I don't mean the sex part. I haven't got there. I mean using a metaphor for going down, literally physically going down, by referencing an elevator going up. It's a small thing, but it never fails to induce rage in me.
Thoughts with Heinlein. Exhibitionism is completely natural, and in fact, everybody likes doing it once they get over their social brainwashing.
Counterpoint, Walmart. If I need to explain this, I am so jealous.
Because this is 100% true, voyeurism, its converse, is also completely natural, and everybody likes it all the time, regardless of circumstance. Anyone who feels uncomfortable with this is brainwashed. That concludes our deep thoughts with Heinlein. Also, Jill takes a paragraph or two to share her thoughts on being gay. Oh boy, strap in. See, Mike didn't really have a concept of gender and would probably have had no problem sleeping with a male water brother, but obviously this was completely unacceptable, so Jill carefully coached him into not being appealing.
She actually had to attract him. Wait, what did she say? It's actually not going back fast enough.
No problem sleeping with a male water brother, but obviously...
She actually looks really freaked out. But don't worry, it's the 60s, so we're going to pretend he's straight. Which is weird, considering this entire book is basically Heinlein doing it, but it's weird that you have a character who explicitly doesn't seem that way, but whatever.
Obviously, this was...
Heinlein later came out as gay, right? Or was incredibly closeted. I'm just getting that vibe. That maybe it's just me.
Completely unacceptable, so Jill carefully coached him into not being appealing to gay people, and her approach to this was having him use his psychic powers to make himself look manlier.
Oh yeah, I'm standing by my previous statement really hard right now. Oh boy.
Because if there's one thing gay dudes don't like, it's dudes. Jill also really hopes Mike never becomes water brothers with a gay person, but she's pretty sure he'd be able to detect that there's something fundamentally wrong with them and wouldn't let it happen. It's time for more deep thoughts with Heinlein.
I know she's doing this ironically, but at some point I'm just wondering, oh God, how many times did she bang her head against the desk, hand, wall, or a conveniently placed pillow to scream, reading this book to be able to just do this? Also in the comments, Michael Hamilton mentioned, I work at Walmart, and yeah, true. Yeah. If you go to one more than 5 minutes, you will know. Yeah.
See, love should be free and without boundaries, as long as that free love is never gay. It's okay to socially brainwash someone if it's to keep them from being gay, guys. That's just basic science. That concludes our deep thoughts with Heinlein. Anyway, Mike telepathically links Jill's mind with the minds of the dudes in the audience ogling her so she can see how she's seen by guys who find her attractive, and it only reinforces her judgment that voyeurism is totally cool. She's also briefly surprised to see that she finds the other girls attractive when viewed through the eyes of the audience, but don't worry, it's only when she's looking through guys' eyes. Definitely not even a little bit gay, because that would be bad. So anyway, Mike and Jill move on, and Mike is continually frustrated by world religions not actually answering his questions about souls and old ones and stuff, and then in a fit of frustration,
Considering this entire thing is about the sex cult in the third part of the book, and now there's monkeys on the screen, I don't, oh no. What I don't get is how this book grew to such a, never mind, it was the 60s. There were various types of writers in the 60s. And yeah, still less pornographic than some of the things that happened in the Victorian era. For anyone who just wonders about what I just said, there was a poll or a review about the percentage of houses in suburban London compared to brothels. Houses didn't win.
he visits a zoo, like you do, and observes a medium-sized monkey get beat up by a big monkey and then turn around and beat up a smaller monkey. At this poignant display of the cycle of abuse, Mike laughs for the first time and realizes that comedy is built on pain and that humans laugh because they can't do anything else. So now that Mike understands human suffering,
I mean, he's not wrong, but also that's a little psychotic.
he decides to do something about it by taking his sex cult global. So Mike goes off and gets a diploma mill's worth of degrees and then found something called the Church of All Worlds. Ben goes to
It's like a science. That's something that you have tautology of. Tautology science, even. I'm sure that's not related.
talk to Jubal about said church because he recently visited it and has some thoughts. So the Church of All Worlds is more of a nudist colony / Martian language school with a central nest where the inner circle of water brothers hang out in a big polyamorous pile. The gang has expanded somewhat and includes a few religious people. Since Mike's cult doesn't replace other religions, it improves them. Mike's also explicitly running his church like a
Come on, come on. We promise it's not weird. The only reason this is not the video in this entire live stream that is making me cringe the most is because the Burger Krieg succeeded in that so much more than I actually feel comfortable remembering right now, and I regret having the thoughts about it.
con or a carnival, treating everyone like marks, then drawing in the ones that seem receptive so he can hook them, teach them Martian, and initiate them into the inner circle.
It's called a cult, folks. This is standard.
It's a cult, baby. That's how they all work. Anyway, Ben and Jubal discuss Mike's telekinetic miracles and how all of his high-level sermons end in orgies, and Ben also recounts how he got to see Jill, who's prettier than ever on account of all the psychic powers she's developed from learning Martian and banging Mike. She explained to Ben how it's not really a religion or a cult, they're just trying to show people the truth. Wow, that's so funny. That's what every religion and cult says. Oh, by the way,
Just embrace the cringe at this point.
there's this other lady in the cult who's a former fosterite named Dawn, and she and Jill have been using their psychic powers to look more like each other. This is never explained. I think it's just something Heinlein is into. So Ben hangs out with Jill and Mike and the rest of the
Twins, Basil, twins. Oh, come on. I'm not the only one thinking that right now.
gang and has a very uncomfortable time being the only guy at the perma orgy who is wearing pants because apparently clothes and privacy are categorically disallowed in Heinlein's utopia. There is barely a concept of consent here because none of these people in the nest would ever say no, so why would you ask? And Ben, who is saying no to a lot of this, is being treated like he'll learn or come around. For the record, he does not, but that doesn't stop someone from having sex with him.
Artist rendering. It's time to duel.
Anyway, Heinlein, did you just write one of your male leads being assaulted by your sex cult and treat it like it was a good thing? Anyway, Ben tells Jubal.
Yes. Yes, you did. Normally, I save overly sarcastic productions for the end because I don't usually cringe nearly as hard because I love how Red talks about things. And, you know, I'm enjoying her coverage of this because God help me if I had listened to someone covering this and they were like, this is a really cool book that really influenced me, because by the end of this coverage, I would be thinking, okay, I need to start running. And now it's like, okay, someone gets how internally crazy this is because it's Heinlein. He isn't the worst author from this time period. If only because there's there's stories about the shit other authors have done. Or, for example, Hemingway was literally writing every single book about his repression of his own feelings and trying to escape the trauma of a previous existence by saying that he's nothing like his father, by then imitating his father completely, including it up to ending his, let's say, life in the same way his father did, because he couldn't live up to the unrealistic expectations that he was trying to project into audio, into his own books. Yeah. Depressing when you realize they're all a cry for help.
Well, all about what's up in the nest, and after a winding explanation that he's being a prude and heterosexual polyamory is the one true way to really live, man, Ben is convinced and runs off to join the sex cult. Quick 180. Meanwhile, the Martians sever their psychic link with Mike. They've learned all they can about humanity and will now deliberate over whether or not to destroy the Earth. But who
Honestly, at this point, yeah, go for it. Oh, God.
wants to hear about that boring old junk? Back to the sex cult, please. So people keep trying to arrest Mike for various sex-related crimes, but for some reason, those people never seem to make it to court. Wow.
Yeah, shocking. It's like, it's horrible. Also, considering all the people he disappeared I can't speak today, literally with the people in the fourth dimension, which was heaven, he's just sending them to heaven. So good for them. They get to skip all the crazy, creepy cult stuff.
Oh, Mike's really getting cavalier with the murder. Are we sure this isn't a horror story? Then while Mike is in jail for a little bit, the Fosterites declare a holy war and burn down their church. Oh no. But it's okay because everyone used their magical Martian mind powers to teleport to safety. Because they can teleport now. That's the power of heterosexual free love, baby. Jubal goes to visit the sex cult in the hotel they're currently using as a home base.
We're wearing pants. Astrally projecting. Do not disturb. And Enemy Nichan, you mentioned, wow, I read smut, but this is making me feel dirty. You are not the only one. Oh, God, you are not the only one. This is disturbing. And I will be checking out the Norfolk Wizard game right after this one.
He also learns that Mike escaped from prison no problem, and while his body is safely in the hotel, his astral self is out there screwing with the Fosterites and making all their guns disappear and stuff. Man, it'd be kind of cool to see all this stuff instead of hearing about it later. So Jubal hangs out with the Ubermensch sex cult, who, thanks to learning Martian and having zero priorities in life other than having a good heterosexual time, are all gorgeous psychic superhumans now. And then when he goes to bed, Dawn shows up and coerces him into sleeping with her even after he turns her down 3 times.
I just love old writers, and I'll cry if you turn me down a 4th time.
Heinlein, did you just write your self-insert character being assaulted by your sex cult and frame it like it was a good thing? So anyway, Mike tells
I know Red's playing that off as kind of a joke. It's like, your self-insert was assaulted and it's a good thing, but also when you're vain enough to give all those titles to your self-insert, make it clear it's your self-insert talking up how great you are, and then you want to do this to your self-insert. I'm just saying, if a therapist ever got this guy to sit down, they have a guaranteed source of income for life. Because there's no way they're fixing that shit. This is the point where medication is like, you know what? You're on your own. Placebos all the way, man. Oh boy.
Jubal that the Martians might show up to wreck the Earth in about 5,000 years, but humanity has a chance at survival if they embrace the true, unique power of humanity, that is, heterosexual love. Yep, the one thing unique to the human race. That's it, you've cracked the code. Good job. Nobody tell Mike about every other species with a spinal cord. Also, Jill has gotten over her
No, they might be okay with that. How are you guys staying hidden? Murder.
silly little murder is wrong hang-up, so she and the gang have been casually disappearing anyone who realizes they're hiding in the hotel, and also any major government officials they grok as wrong. Last night, they killed 150 people. I promise, this is not framed as a horror story. I promise. Anyway.
I kind of think it would be better if it was framed as a horror story. In fact, I would love to see a rewrite of this as a horror story from the outside perspective of the evil sex cult is murdering people. Oh, wait, that's literally the Mansons. Huh. Yeah. Considering this is the 60s, there's a non-zero chance that that is explicitly related. So I'm going to forget I thought of any of this because I don't like this. Let's just forget I ever said anything.
Anyway, Jubal reassures Mike that his cult is literally unstoppable and will easily outcompete the rest of the human race, and that once all the non-believers die out, Mike's superpowered family will inherit the Earth. Mike is pleased, and then goes outside to deal with the angry mob that's been accumulating. So Mike is illuminated by a golden sunbeam, vanishes all of his clothes, and is immediately killed. Nobody but Jubal is upset by this because nobody but Jubal thinks death is real anymore. So Jubal is upset and goes to kill himself, but Mike has other ideas and intervenes, confirming that, yep, death isn't real, Mike is—
It's okay, death has no consequence, and that's why you shouldn't kill yourself. That makes sense. Except it's not real because you just proved it, so killing yourself would also not be a thing. It's literally just not real, so it's like, oh, I'm waking up today. No, you're not. Oh, I didn't wake up because I never would sleep. I always would sleep, but I wasn't asleep. Again, Highline's a hack. Don't even think about it too hard.
Is totally still around, and it ain't no thing. So the gang cooks Mike into soup, because remember, Martians are cannibals, and that's A-okay. And Jubal has some Mike soup and begins writing—
Once upon a time, when the world was young, there was a Martian named Smith. Valentine Michael Smith was as real as taxes and as delicious as butterball turkey. Hugo, you mentioned that this book won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1962. The Hugo Awards have always had one thing, actually not even the Hugo Awards, every writing award has always had one thing in common. They're either heavily bought out or barely repressed sexual and fantasies and fetishes that you write in a slightly different format to put a little veneer of respectability on them, always win. And I don't mean that derogatively. Sometimes it's done in unique and interesting ways, and then sometimes you Heinlein it. Because, oh my God, he's brave enough in the 60s to talk about this. Shocking. But also, he's not a hippie. That's the important part. I'm joking, but also at the same time, it's kind of how that is, so... Ugh. And Derek, you're asking what the F you're listening to? A quick summary of A Stranger in the Strange Land, a book from the 1960s that is very much, let's call it, the historical ancestor of 50 Shades of Grey, but yet somehow making that book look more healthy. Progress.
a new book about Mike titled A Martian Named Smith, which, fun fact, was the working title of this book. So yeah, in case you weren't convinced that Jubal was a full-on author insert, he canonically wrote the book he's in. Anyway, the postscript informs us that the Martians do eventually decide to destroy the Earth, but at that point the humans are all Mike's superpowered, free-loving descendants and easily fight him off. And also that Mike ascends to heaven, once again becoming the Archangel Michael. So in case you were wondering if we were supposed to question the morality of his actions, it's fine. He was a literal angel the whole time. Whee! People astray.
This is the second most disturbing thing we've seen today. If only because this is still fiction. I'm looking at you, Burger Krieg. You know what you did. Also, ooh, Sue, thank you for joining the membership. Nice. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to agree with Derry on this one and go bleach my brain, is what I would say, except this is live. So I've got to do more things after that. Hopefully we'll be nowhere. Oh, we're doing hand plates. Hi, everyone. We're going to have pain later. More importantly, all my admittedly very justified oh godding aside. Oh God. You know, just because why not one more time for good measure? This was a really good coverage by Red. And I'm so glad, as I said earlier, that we're checking this out from someone who wasn't idolizing that book, because no, there's a line where you're sitting there going, I should probably run away. And that line would be, yeah, I like some of the ideas this guy wrote. That is very much the line, and I would like to avoid that. Yeah. I would recommend this, though. I can see why I did so good, because it's, admittedly, Red's art, I love it. It's generally fun. And just seeing how it's completely nonsensical, it makes sense. I already have my opinions of Heinlein, and this is not disproving my belief. Let's put it that way. Yeah. All the same, if you guys haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And I'll see you in the next one.